the crushing weight of hope. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed like angry wasps as Elena Vasquez clutched the manila envelope containing her sister's test results. Her nursing uniform was wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, and coffee stains decorated her white sneakers. But none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was the devastating diagnosis inside that envelope. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with severe obstruction. Dr. Martinez had explained in clinical terms that felt like hammers against Elena's skull. Sophia needs immediate surgical intervention, a septal myectomy. Without it, she has maybe 6 months. Elena pressed her back against the cool hospital wall, watching her 16-year-old sister through the small window of room 314. Sophia lay propped up against pillows, her dark hair fanned across the stark white pillowcase, oxygen cannula tucked beneath her nose. Even hooked up to machines, she managed to smile when she caught Elena's eye, raising her hand in a small wave that broke Elena's heart into 1,000 pieces. The surgery would cost $300,000. $300,000 that their family didn't have, couldn't borrow, and couldn't imagine obtaining. Elena's mother, Rosa, worked 16-hour days cleaning office buildings downtown, her hands raw from industrial chemicals, her back bent from years of scrubbing floors. Elena herself juggled 3 part-time jobs while finishing her medical degree, tutoring pre-med students, working nights at a diner, and picking up weekend shifts at the hospital. Together, they barely scraped by each month. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her study group, reminding her about tomorrow's biochemistry exam. She almost laughed at the absurdity. How could she focus on molecular structures and metabolic pathways when her sister was dying? How could she pretend that her future as a doctor mattered when she couldn't even save the person who mattered most? Mija? Her mother's voice, soft and tired, came from behind her. Rosa Vasquez approached slowly, her cleaning uniform replaced by a faded floral dress she reserved for hospital visits. How is she? Elena couldn't bring herself to speak the truth aloud again. Instead, she handed over the envelope and watched her mother's face crumble as she read the surgeon's notes. The recommended procedure, the risks, the astronomical cost that might as well have been written in a foreign language for all the sense it made to their reality. "We'll find a way," Rosa whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "We have to find a way." That night, Elena sat at her laptop until dawn, applying for emergency loans, researching charity organizations, and sending desperate emails to medical foundations. Each rejection felt like another nail in Sophia's coffin. As the sun rose over the city, casting golden light through her apartment's single window, Elena realized she would do anything, absolutely anything, to save her sister's life. She just didn't know yet what anything would cost her. An offer too dangerous to refuse. 3 weeks of desperate searching had yielded nothing but form letters of rejection and sympathetic but useless advice. Elena's eyes were permanently rimmed with dark circles, and she'd lost 10 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. Sophia's condition was deteriorating faster than the doctors had predicted, and the beeping of the heart monitor seemed to grow more irregular each day. It was a Thursday evening when Elena's world shifted on its axis. She was leaving the university library, her backpack heavy with medical textbooks she hadn't had time to open, when she literally collided with destiny. The impact sent her sprawling across the marble floor, papers scattering like autumn leaves, her laptop sliding dangerously close to a decorative fountain. "Watch where you're—" The sharp rebuke died on the stranger's lips as their eyes met. Elena found herself staring up at a man who seemed carved from expensive granite, sharp jawline, steel gray eyes, and a suit that probably cost more than her family's rent for 6 months. He was younger than she'd expected from his commanding presence, maybe late 20s, with the kind of controlled intensity that made the air around him feel charged. "I'm sorry," Elena stammered, scrambling to collect her papers. Her financial aid documents mixed with Sophia's medical records, creating a paper trail of her desperation. "I wasn't looking where I was going." Adrian Blackwood, though she didn't know his name yet, found himself studying the young woman before him with unexpected interest. Most people who bumped into him were either terrified or calculating, trying to figure out how to use the encounter to their advantage. This girl seemed genuinely flustered, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment rather than opportunism. But it was the medical documents scattered around them that caught his attention, particularly one with "Urgent Surgical Intervention Required" stamped across the top in red ink. "Your sister?" he asked, nodding toward Sophia's chest X-ray that had landed near his Italian leather shoes. Elena's hand stilled on the papers. "Yes, she's—" The words stuck in her throat like broken glass. "She's dying." Something flickered across Adrian's features. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. He'd built his empire on reading people, on finding their pressure points and exploiting them. But this wasn't calculation in the girl's eyes. It was pure desperate love. "Adrian Blackwood," he said, extending his hand to help her up. "And you are?" "Elena Vasquez." She accepted his hand, surprised by its warmth. "I know who you are. Everyone knows who you are." Blackwood Industries had been in the news recently for acquiring 3 smaller tech companies in what the business journals called aggressive expansion. Then, "You know I don't make a habit of helping strangers," Adrian said, his voice taking on that cold edge his board members knew to fear. "But you interest me, Elena Vasquez. Your sister needs expensive surgery, and you're a medical student. Drowning in debt with no viable options, it wasn't a question. He'd absorbed the financial aid documents and medical reports with the same efficiency. He used to analyze corporate acquisitions." Elena's spine straightened. "I'm not asking for charity." "Good, because I'm not offering it." Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture Elena would later learn meant he was making a decision that would change everything. "I'm offering you a contract." The word hung between them like a sword suspended by a thread. Elena had heard whispers about Adrian Blackwood's contracts, legal documents so airtight that entire teams of lawyers couldn't find loopholes, binding agreements that had made him the youngest billionaire in the state and the most feared man in 3 industries. "What kind of contract?" Elena asked, though part of her already knew she would agree to almost anything. 3 years as my personal assistant. You'll live in my penthouse. Be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'll manage my schedule, handle my correspondence, accompany me to social functions, and perform any other duties I deem necessary. His eyes never left hers as he outlined terms that sounded more like indentured servitude than employment. "In return, I'll pay for your sister's surgery, all expenses, the best cardiac surgeon in the country, private recovery room, whatever she needs." Elena's mouth went dry. "What aren't you telling me?" A ghost of a smile touched Adrian's lips. "Smart girl. The contract includes a morality clause. No dating, no relationships that might interfere with your duties. You'll sign a non-disclosure agreement that will ruin you financially if you ever speak about our arrangement or anything you learn about my business. And if you breach any terms or try to leave before the 3 years are up, you'll owe me triple the surgery costs plus damages." The terms were draconian, designed to trap her completely. Elena thought of Sophia's labored breathing, of the way her mother's shoulders shook when she thought no one was looking, of the stack of rejection letters growing on her kitchen table. "I need to think about it," Elena said. Though they both knew she'd already made her decision, Adrian pulled out a business card, pristine white with minimalist black lettering. "You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, the offer disappears forever." As he walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor, Elena realized she was holding more than just a business card. She was holding her sister's life in her hands, with her own freedom as the price of admission. Behind the glass walls. The penthouse occupied the entire 40th floor of the Meridian Tower, a glass and steel monument to Adrian's success that pierced the city skyline like a chrome spear. Elena stood in the marble foyer, her single suitcase looking pathetically small next to the sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Your room is on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left," Adrian said without looking up from his tablet. "Mrs. Chen will show you around and explain the house rules." You start tomorrow at 5:30 a.m. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a stern-faced woman in her 60s who ran Adrian's household with military precision. As she led Elena through room after room of museum-quality furniture and priceless art, Elena felt increasingly like Alice falling down a very expensive rabbit hole. Mr. Blackwood takes his coffee black. Exactly 160 degrees in the Wedgwood cup, never the others, Mrs. Chen recited as they walked. He reviews the financial reports every morning at 6:15 sharp. Phone calls are screened through you first, no exceptions. And this, she stopped in front of a closed door at the end of the hallway, is strictly off limits. Mr. Blackwood's private study. You are never to enter without explicit permission. Elena's room was larger than her family's entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But the luxury felt hollow when she thought about Sophia, who was spending her first night post-surgery in the cardiac ICU. The operation had been successful. Dr. Harrison, the surgeon Adrian had flown in from Johns Hopkins, had worked for 8 hours to repair Sophia's damaged heart. Elena had cried with relief when she heard those beautiful words. The surgery went perfectly. But now, standing in this pristine cage, Elena wondered what she'd truly signed up for. The next morning arrived with cruel punctuality. Elena's alarm buzzed at 5 a.m., and she stumbled through her new routine, preparing Adrian's coffee, reviewing his schedule, organizing his correspondence. He appeared in the kitchen at exactly 6 a.m., dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like expensive armor. The Hartwell meeting has been moved to 10, Elena reported, consulting the color-coded calendar she'd already memorized. Your 2 o'clock with the Singapore investors is confirmed, and you have dinner with Senator Reynolds at 8. Adrian accepted his coffee without comment, but Elena noticed he paused when he tasted it, exactly 160 degrees, just as Mrs. Chen had specified. For a moment, something almost like approval flickered in his eyes, but it vanished so quickly Elena wondered if she'd imagined it. The days blurred into a routine of careful efficiency. Elena learned to anticipate Adrian's needs before he voiced them, to navigate his moods like a ship's captain reading dangerous waters. He was demanding without being cruel, exacting without being unreasonable, but always, always distant. She was invisible furniture with a pulse, useful but utterly replaceable. It was during her 3rd week that Elena discovered the photographs. She'd been looking for a file in Adrian's home office when she accidentally knocked over a picture frame, revealing others hidden behind it. The images showed a younger Adrian, maybe 22 or 23, with his arm around a beautiful blonde woman. They looked happy in that careless way of people who believe love will conquer everything. In one photo, the woman was showing off an engagement ring, her face radiant with joy. "Put those back!" Adrian's voice, cold as winter steel, made Elena jump. She hadn't heard him enter. "I'm sorry, I said put them back." He moved across the room with predatory grace, taking the photographs from her trembling hands. "These are none of your concern." But Elena had seen something in his face when he looked at those pictures, a flash of pain so raw it made her chest ache. For just a moment, the billionaire's armor had cracked, revealing the man underneath. "She hurt you," Elena said softly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Adrian's jaw tightened. "She taught me that contracts are more reliable than promises, that money is more honest than love, that people will do anything if the price is right, including you, Miss Vasquez." The words hit Elena like a physical blow, but she stood her ground. "You're wrong about me." "Am I?" Adrian moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. "You sold yourself to me for the price of your sister's surgery. How is that different from any other transaction?" Elena lifted her chin, meeting his cold stare with blazing determination. "Because I didn't do it for money. I did it for love. And someday, someone will show you the difference." For a heartbeat, something shifted in Adrian's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. But then his walls slammed back into place and he turned away, dismissing her with a gesture as casual as swatting a fly. That night, Elena stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the broken man sleeping down the hall. She'd signed a contract to save her sister's life, but she was beginning to understand that Adrian Blackwood might need saving too. Cracks in the armor. 2 months into her contract, Elena had mapped every scar in Adrian's emotional landscape. She knew he took his phone calls in the East Corridor when they were particularly brutal, usually involving hostile takeovers or firing executives. She knew he worked until 3 a.m. when quarterly reports were due, surviving on black coffee and stubborn determination. She knew he kept a picture of his parents, who had died in a car accident when he was 19, hidden in his desk drawer next to antacid. Tablets and reading glasses he was too proud to wear in public. What she didn't know was why he'd started watching her. It began subtly, Adrian lingering in the kitchen while she prepared his morning schedule, his eyes following her movements with scientific curiosity rather than romantic interest. He began asking questions that had nothing to do with business: how Sophia was recovering, whether Elena missed her medical studies, what she thought about the documentary they'd watched during a rare, quiet evening. "You're different from what I expected," Adrian admitted one Friday night as they worked late in his office, the city sprawling beneath them in a tapestry of light and shadow. Elena looked up from the contracts she was reviewing, surprised by the observation. "What did you expect?" "Resentment. Most people in your position would hate me by now." Adrian set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "You have every right to. I've essentially bought you, dictated every aspect of your life for the past 2 months. But you saved Sophia," Elena said simply. "Hate is a luxury I can't afford when my sister is alive because of you." Something flickered across Adrian's features, an emotion too quick to identify but profound enough to change the entire atmosphere of the room. "She's doing well? The recovery?" Elena's face lit up with genuine joy, transforming her from efficient assistant to loving sister in an instant. "She's amazing. The doctors say her heart function has improved dramatically. She starts her senior year next month and wants to study engineering. She says—" Elena caught herself, suddenly self-conscious about sharing personal details. "She says what?" Adrian prompted, and Elena was startled to hear genuine interest in his voice. "She says she wants to build bridges, not just the structural kind, but the kind that connect people." Elena smiled at the memory of Sophia's enthusiastic explanation during their last phone call. "She thinks the world needs more connection and less division." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "She sounds wise for 17. 16, Elena corrected. "She won't be 17 until Christmas." "Ah." Adrian made a note in his phone, and Elena wondered why her sister's birthday would matter to him. The shift in their dynamic became more pronounced the following week when Adrian insisted Elena accompany him to a charity gala, something about needing her to take notes on potential business contacts. Elena suspected it was an excuse. Adrian's memory was razor sharp, and he'd never needed note-taking assistance before. The gala was a glittering affair in the city's most exclusive hotel, filled with politicians, celebrities, and titans of industry air-kissing while competing to outspend each other on charity auction items. Elena felt like an imposter in the designer dress Adrian had insisted she wear, a simple but elegant black gown that probably cost more than her family's grocery budget for 6 months. "Stay close," Adrian murmured as they entered the ballroom, his hand settling possessively on the small of her back. "These people are sharks, and they can smell inexperience in the water." Elena was prepared for the wealth, the ostentation, even the casual cruelty of people who measured worth in stock portfolios. What she wasn't prepared for was seeing Adrian transform. Away from the cold efficiency of his business persona, Adrian revealed glimpses of the man he might have been in different circumstances. He was charming without being false, intelligent without being condescending, and when he thought no one was looking, unexpectedly kind. Elena watched him quietly arrange for the catering staff to take home leftover food, saw him slip an extra tip to the coat check girl who looked exhausted, noticed how he steered conversations away from topics that made others uncomfortable. The revelation came during the charity auction when a signed guitar from a famous musician went up for bidding. The cause was pediatric cardiac research, a fact that made Elena's breath catch in her throat as she thought of Sophia. The bidding was fierce, with several prominent businessmen driving the price higher and higher. At $50,000, most bidders dropped out. At $75,000, only two remained: Adrian and a tech mogul named Harrison Pierce, who'd made headlines for his messy divorce and questionable business practices. $100,000, Pierce called out. Smug satisfaction evident in his voice, Adrian didn't hesitate. $200,000. The room fell silent. Pierce's face reddened, but he shook his head, conceding defeat. When the auctioneer's gavel fell, Adrian had purchased a guitar he'd never play for an amount that would fund research for dozens of children with heart conditions like Sophia's. Later, as they rode home in Adrian's car, Elena couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "You don't even like music," she said, referring to the guitar now carefully stored in his trunk. Adrian stared out the window at the passing streetlights, his profile sharp against the darkness. "I like children having the chance to grow up." The simple honesty of the statement hit Elena like a physical blow. This was the same man who'd trapped her in an ironclad contract, who ruled his business empire with ruthless efficiency, who seemed incapable of genuine human emotion. But he'd just donated $200,000 to help kids he'd never meet, simply because it was the right thing to do. "You're not the monster you pretend to be," Elena said softly. Adrian turned to look at her, his eyes unreadable in the dim light. "Don't mistake strategy for kindness, Elena. Everything I do serves a purpose." "And what purpose does helping sick children serve?" For a moment, Adrian's carefully constructed walls wavered. "Maybe I'm trying to balance the scales," he admitted. "Maybe I'm tired of being the villain in every story." The vulnerability in his voice made Elena's heart ache. Without thinking, she reached across the seat and covered his hand with hers. The contact was electric, sending shock waves through both of them that had nothing to do with the contract binding them together. "You're not a villain," Elena whispered. "You're just a man who's been hurt so badly he forgot how to trust." Adrian stared down at their joined hands, his carefully controlled world suddenly feeling very small and very fragile. When he looked up, Elena saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Hope, terrifying and beautiful and completely genuine. The car pulled up to the Meridian Tower, but neither of them moved to get out. The space between them hummed with possibility, with the recognition that something fundamental had shifted in their carefully defined relationship. "Elena," Adrian said, her name sounding different in his voice, softer, more human. But before either of them could examine what was happening, Elena's phone rang with the harsh reality of their situation. The caller ID showed Sophia's number, and Elena answered immediately, her sister's voice bright and healthy, and completely unaware that she'd just interrupted a moment that might have changed everything. As Elena chatted with Sophia about her upcoming school semester, Adrian closed his eyes and rebuilt his walls brick by brick. Some boundaries, he told himself, were too dangerous to cross, especially when crossing them might destroy the very thing he was trying to protect. Love beyond contracts. The beginning of the end started with a phone call at 3 in the morning. Elena jerked awake to the sound of her cell phone buzzing insistently against the nightstand. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Elena's blood turned to ice. "Rosa never called this late unless something was catastrophically wrong." "Mija." Her mother's voice was thick with tears. "It's Sophia. She collapsed at school. They're saying her heart—" Elena was out of bed and pulling on clothes before her mother finished the sentence. She grabbed her keys, her wallet, her fear crystallizing into sharp, desperate focus. Sophia had been doing so well. The surgery was supposed to have fixed everything. She was halfway down the hallway when Adrian appeared, still dressed despite the late hour, his hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. "What's wrong?" he asked, taking in her panicked state immediately. "Sophia." The name came out as a broken whisper. "She's in the hospital. I need to go." "I'll drive," Adrian said without hesitation, already reaching for his car keys. "You don't have to." I'm driving, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Come on. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of city lights and Elena's whispered prayers. Adrian's hand found hers somewhere between the 10th and 15th traffic light, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture of comfort that transcended their contractual boundaries. At the hospital, they found Rosa pacing in the cardiac wing waiting room, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion. She looked up as Elena and Adrian approached, her expression shifting to confusion when she saw Elena's unlikely companion. The surgery, Dr. Harrison was explaining to them 20 minutes later, his voice grave. It was successful, but Sophia's heart is rejecting the repair. We need to perform an immediate transplant or... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena felt the world tilt beneath her feet, her vision blurring with tears and terror. A heart transplant meant finding a compatible donor, meant months of waiting, meant expenses that would dwarf even Sophia's previous surgery. How much? Elena asked, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. For the transplant, the anti-rejection medications, the extended recovery period, we're looking at close to $1 million. $1 million. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossibility crushing her chest. Even Adrian's vast wealth had limits, and she'd already cost him hundreds of thousands. Do it, Adrian said quietly. Elena's eyes snapped open. Adrian, no. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm telling you, do the surgery, Dr. Harrison, whatever she needs, however much it costs. Dr. Harrison nodded and hurried away to begin preparations. Rosa murmured her thanks through fresh tears, but Elena just stared at Adrian, her heart breaking and mending simultaneously. Why? She whispered when they were alone in the hallway. Why would you do this? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face as if memorizing every detail. Because 3 months ago you told me that someday someone would show me the difference between money and love. I think you already have. The words hit Elena with the force of revelation. Adrian, I've spent 10 years building walls, he continued, his voice raw with honesty. Telling myself that emotions were weakness, that caring about people would destroy me. But watching you these past months, seeing how you'd sacrifice everything for your family, how you choose compassion even when it costs you, you've shown me that love isn't weakness. It's the only strength that matters. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Adrian admitted, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they did her. I'm saying that contract was supposed to protect me from feeling anything real, but instead it gave me the most real thing I've ever experienced. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. But the contract... Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew the legal document that had bound them together, the pages that had defined every aspect of their relationship for the past 3 months. With deliberate ceremony, he tore it in half, then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to the hospital floor like confetti. What contract? He asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Elena launched herself into his arms, and Adrian caught her, spinning her around in the middle of the hospital corridor as if they were the only 2 people in the world. When he set her down, his hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. I love you too, Elena whispered against his lips. I think I've been falling in love with you since that first night. When I realized you weren't the monster you pretended to be. Their kiss tasted like hope and new beginnings, like promises that didn't need legal documents to make them binding. Sophia's transplant was successful. The donor heart, from a young man who died in an accident, beating strong and steady in her chest. During her recovery, she met Elena's mysterious benefactor and pronounced him much less scary than expected, and definitely good enough for my sister. Elena returned to medical school that fall, her tuition paid by a scholarship from the newly established Vasquez Foundation for Cardiac Research, a foundation that Adrian had created and funded, though he insisted on keeping his involvement anonymous. She graduated 2 years later as Dr. Elena Vasquez, with Sophia healthy and strong in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else. The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends in the penthouse where their love story had begun. Elena wore her grandmother's dress, and Adrian wore an expression of wonder that never quite left his face. Sophia, fully recovered and radiant, served as maid of honor, while Rosa cried happy tears and kept muttering about miracles in Spanish. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Adrian whispered in Elena's ear, "Thank you for showing me that some contracts are written on hearts instead of paper." Elena smiled up at him. This man who'd started as her captor and become her salvation. "Thank you for proving that love is worth any price." Outside the penthouse windows, the city sparkled with a million lights. But none of them burned as bright as the love between a billionaire who'd learned to trust again and the woman who'd taught him that the most valuable things in life could never be bought, only given freely, one heart to another. The end.